The crisp scent of pine and the chill of frost filled the evening air as I knelt in my garden, gathering the last of my herbs before winter claimed them. My fingers, numb and stiff from the cold, moved with practiced precision, a rhythm carved out by years of solitude. The distant howls of the pack echoed through the forest that bordered my small cottage, reminding me of everything I had lost and everything I had never truly had. Tonight was the autumn moon ceremony, a time when wolves from all over the northern territories gathered to honor their ancestors and strengthen their pack bonds, every wolf except me. I tucked a strand of pale blonde hair behind my ear, pushing away the hollow ache in my chest. 10 years had passed since the alpha of the Silver Creek pack had called me defective, an omega without the calming gifts that made my kind valuable. He had called me a broken link, the kind of weakness that would weaken our chain. My parents had bowed their heads in shame as I was escorted to the border and told never to return. My fingers brushed over the small silver pendant hanging around my neck, a wolf with eyes made of tiny blue stones, the last gift my grandmother had given me before she died. "The quiet ones see what others miss," she had whispered as she pressed it into my palm. "Your strength lies where others see weakness." I held on to those words through the darkest nights, though their meaning remained a mystery. A snap of twigs at the edge of the clearing broke my reverie. I froze, my senses still sharp despite years of neglect, straining toward the sound. The wind shifted, bringing with it the unmistakable scent of blood. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice small in the vastness of the approaching night. No response. Just a low, pained growl that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. I should have retreated into my cottage, locked the door, and waited for whatever wounded creature was out there to move on. The forest was full of dangers, especially on nights like tonight when emotions and territorial instincts ran high. But something, maybe the same flaw that had cost me my place in the pack, drove me toward the sound. At the edge of my garden, partially hidden by shadows and fallen leaves, lay a massive wolf. His coat was as dark as midnight, stained with blood that gleamed in the fading light. One of his legs was bent at an unnatural angle, and a deep gash ran across his side, exposing the white of bone. His breathing was shallow and labored, but his eyes, amber and burning, with a fire I couldn't ignore, followed me with wary intelligence. This wasn't just any wolf. This was a werewolf in his shifted form. And from his size alone I could tell he wasn't some low-ranking pack member. A chill settled in my stomach. Helping a wolf, any wolf, could be seen as interfering in pack matters, I whispered to myself, knowing that such an act was punishable by far worse than exile. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said softly, crouching a safe distance away. "I can help if you'll let me." The wolf's lips pulled back, showing teeth made for tearing flesh. A warning, "Stay away!" But the threat lost its weight in the face of the blood pooling beneath him and the tremors running through his powerful frame. I should have listened. I should have respected the boundaries he was trying to set, even in his weakened state. But the pendant against my skin grew warm, and my grandmother's words echoed in my mind. Before I could second-guess myself, I found myself moving toward the cottage. "I'll be right back. Don't die while I'm gone." Oh. Inside, I gathered my medical supplies, herbs, bandages, needle and thread, along with a poultice I had prepared for wound healing. When I returned, the wolf had dragged himself closer to my door, leaving a dark trail across the frost-covered ground. His amber eyes, now clouded with pain, locked onto the bundle in my arms. "I need you to shift if you can," I said, softly kneeling beside him. "I can treat you better in human form." A low growl rumbled from him, his lips curling in a painful grimace. "Or stay as a wolf," I added, meeting his gaze. "Your choice, but I'll help you either way." For a moment I thought he might snap at me, but then his body contorted. Bones cracked and shifted with an awful, agonizing sound, as if his body was being remade from the inside out. The sight of it made me look away, even after all these years in isolation. There was something about the transformation that always unsettled me. When I dared to glance back, a man lay where the wolf had been, The sheer weight of his presence seemed to fill the small space around us. Even bleeding and broken power radiated off him. His hair was as black as his wolf's coat, his features sharp and aristocratic. And those same burning amber eyes met mine, full of pain, suspicion, and something else I couldn't name. "Why would you help me?" His voice was rough, each word clearly costing him. "Don't you know what I am?" I started tending to his wounds, trying to ignore both his nakedness and the strange, almost electric sensation that shot through me every time I touched him. A wolf who's lost too much blood to be asking questions. I murmured, my hands steady, despite the chaos in my chest. He hissed sharply as I prodded the edges of a deep gash along his ribs. "Shh. Save your strength," I whispered, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. "Whatever you are, whoever you are, it doesn't matter tonight." I worked in silence, cleaning his wounds, stitching where necessary. His body told stories, old scars that marked him as a survivor of brutal battles. Whoever he was, he had lived violently. As I wrapped bandages around his torso, his grip tightened around my wrist with a strength that could have broken bone, yet he didn't. "It matters," he said, his eyes burning into mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Because I am Dax Alpha King of the Northern Territories, and you, little healer, have just entangled yourself in a war." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Dax. The ruler of all the wolf packs in the north, the most powerful alpha in generations. And I, an exiled Omega, had him bleeding on my doorstep. Before I could process the weight of this revelation, a howl pierced the night. Too close. His body tense beneath my hands. "They're coming," he muttered, trying to rise. "They can't find me here." "You're in danger," I said, pushing him back down with surprising ease. "You'll bleed out if you move, and my cottage is warded." At his questioning look, I added, "I've had 10 years to learn how to keep wolves away. Now lie still and let me finish." Another howl rang out, followed by several more, a hunting party closing in. I worked faster, binding his broken leg as best I could, while he watched me with those unsettling eyes. "Why?" he asked again, his voice hoarse. "Why help me when your scent tells me you've been cast out? You owe wolfkind nothing." The pendant around my neck felt heavier, as if the weight of his words was pulling me under. Maybe I'm helping despite wolfkind, not because of it. His expression shifted, surprise, maybe even respect. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice hoarse but more aware now. I hesitated. Names carried weight in the supernatural world, but he had already given me his. He was vulnerable, and I owed him the same honesty. "Lyra?" I finally said, "My name is Lyra." "Lyra." He repeated, the sound of it lingering in his voice as if he was tasting the name. "When they realize I'm missing from the ceremony, they'll search everywhere. The usurpers will want to finish what they started," he said, his voice growing weaker. "They'll kill anyone who stands in their way." "Usurpers," I echoed, securing the last of his bandages. His eyes drifted closed, his voice growing faint. "My uncle and his sons. They've waited for years for an opportunity." A knot of panic twisted in my chest as his breathing slowed. "Hey, stay with me," I said urgently, tapping his face lightly. I tapped his face lightly, then more firmly, when he didn't respond. "Dax." "Alpha, wake up," I urged. His amber eyes flickered open, unfocused, and clouded with pain. "Hide me," he murmured, barely a whisper. "Just until dawn. Then I'll go." The howls were so close now, I could almost feel them vibrating through the walls. My heart raced, and in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything, though I didn't know it yet. I dragged him inch by painful inch fully inside my cottage, slamming the door behind us and activating the wards with a quiet, whispered incantation. As the night deepened, the howls of the hunting party circled my small home like a suffocating fog. I sat beside the unconscious Alpha King, watching the rise and fall of his chest. My fingers absently traced the outline of my grandmother's pendant, the silver wolf pendant that had been with me since my exile. The quiet ones see what others miss. I whispered to the shadows as though my grandmother herself was listening. Whatever war I had stumbled into, whatever danger now lurked outside my door, I knew with bone-deep certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The pendant gleamed in the firelight and as though it knew what was coming. After 10 years of exile and solitude, my real story was only just beginning. Morning arrived with an unnatural stillness that felt more ominous than comforting. The hunting howls had faded with the darkness, but I knew better than to believe the danger had passed. Wolves were patient predators. I moved silently around my cottage, checking the wards and gathering fresh herbs for the poultices. I would need to change his bandages. Dax still slept on my bed. I had taken the chair beside him, drifting in and out of consciousness, staying alert to every change in his breathing, every subtle shift of his powerful body. In the pale light of dawn, I allowed myself a moment to truly look at him. Even wounded Dax exuded an undeniable authority that made my small cottage feel impossibly smaller. His face, relaxed in sleep, still held a hardness around his mouth and eyes, markings of difficult decisions and burdens I could scarcely imagine. The Northern Territories were home to 12 major packs and countless smaller ones, all answering to the man now lying vulnerable under my faded quilt. A man who had promised to leave at dawn, but whose injuries would make that impossible. I approached the bed, medical supplies in hand, and Dax's eyes snapped open, instantly. Predator's eyes sharp and alert, despite his condition. "You're still here," he observed, his voice rough with sleep and pain. "It's my house," I replied, setting down my supplies. "You, however, were supposed to be gone by now." He attempted to sit up, but groaned and fell back, his face pinched in discomfort. "Give me a moment," he muttered. "Give yourself several days," I countered, gently removing the bandage from his side. The angry red wound was still swollen, but the bleeding had stopped. Infection, however, was still a real concern. "You're not going anywhere like this," I said firmly. His amber eyes narrowed, filled with determination. "I don't have days. Every hour I'm absent gives my enemies time to consolidate power. The packs must not think I'm dead. If you leave now, you'll be dead." I applied a fresh poultice to the wound, trying to ignore his sharp intake of breath. "These need time to heal." "Even with your werewolf abilities," I said, working quickly to rebandage his torso. "You don't understand what's at stake." "Then explain it to me," he urged, his voice rough, as I kept working, determined to stop him from bleeding out. For a long moment he remained silent, studying me with an intensity that made me painfully aware of every imperfection. The way my tangled pale hair fell around my face, the dark circles under my eyes from a sleepless night, and the scar that bisected my left eyebrow from the day I had been cast out. "What pack were you from?" he asked, his voice soft but curious, as if trying to understand me better. The familiar ache bloomed in my chest. "Silver Creek," I replied quietly. Recognition flashed across his face. "Victor's territory." His gaze sharpened. "He's one of the few alphas who didn't attend the ceremony last night." His eyes were burning with curiosity and something else, something that made me feel exposed. "Why were you cast out?" he asked, his voice suddenly urgent, as if my answer held a key to something much bigger than either of us realized. 10 years gone, and the sting of it still burned like it happened yesterday. I was born an Omega, but without the gifts that made our kind useful. No soothing touch, no calming presence. Just nothing. And for that, Alistair had branded me defective. So Alistair exiled a child for being different. Dax said, his voice low and edged with something dangerous. "Sounds about right for that bloodline. He was within his rights as Alpha." I replied automatically, the words falling out of my mouth like a reflex. After all those years, I still believed it on some level. Dax's laugh was dry bitter. "Is that what you've been telling yourself all this time? That you deserved exile because you didn't match their narrow idea of what an Omega should be. My cheeks flushed hot. I didn't say I deserved it, just that it was his call to make. Rights can be wrong, little healer. His hand settled over mine where it rested on his bandage, the simple contact sending an unexpected warmth spiraling through me. And alphas can be blind fools. I pulled my hand back, shaken by both the weight of his words and the way my body responded to his touch. You still haven't told me what exactly happened to you. What war I've been dragged into by saving you. His gaze darkened. My uncle Roderick has been after the Alpha King's crown since we were boys. Last night during the ceremony, he finally made his move. His jaw clenched. He had inside help. My own Beta Zane. I trusted him for 15 years. He led me straight into a trap. How did you get out? I asked. I fought. Just one word, but it said everything about the kind of man he was. Killed 2 of Roderick's sons before I took a silver blade to the ribs. They thought I was dead. I shifted through the poison and ran. His eyes met mine, fierce and raw. And somehow I ended up on the doorstep of the one exiled wolf in the entire territory who chose to help me instead of selling me to the Ironfangs for whatever bounty Roderick's put on my head. Silver, I whispered, the realization snapping into place. That's why you're healing so slow. Silver was deadly to werewolves. It didn't just wound, it lingered, poisoning their blood, dulling their regenerative strength. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. You seemed capable enough without that detail. I ignored the backhanded compliment and walked to the shelf, retrieving a small wooden box. Inside were herbs I had gathered from the most dangerous corners of the forest plants that only bloomed beneath moonlight, rumored to pull silver from blood like it was a curse. This'll help, I said, as I crushed the delicate blue leaves into a thick paste. But it's going to hurt first. He gave me a faint smirk. I'm used to that trade. A flicker of something approval maybe passed through his eyes as I applied the mixture directly to his wound. His whole body tensed, muscles locking tight as a guttural growl rose from his throat. The paste was doing its job, dragging the poison out. Try to rest, I murmured. The herbs need time. But he caught my wrist again, gentler now. Why are you helping me, Lyra? His voice was quiet. The truth this time. I looked down at the pendant around my neck. Maeve's gift still warm against my skin, and then met his gaze. Because it's something I can do. Because no one helped me when I needed it. Because I hesitated, the truth scraping its way up my throat. Because something told me I should. Instinct, he asked, and a knowing glint lit at his eyes. Interesting. For a supposedly broken Omega. Before I could fire back, a sound outside froze the air in my lungs' boots. Several pairs, crunching over the frost-crusted earth. Calm, measured. Hunters who thought they'd found their kill. Dax's face hardened as he pushed up onto his elbows. They found me. Impossible, I breathed, already moving toward the window. The wards won't hold forever, not against wolves who are determined. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, his jaw tightening against the pain. Give me a weapon. You can barely stand. I won't die in a bed, he growled, and I won't let them hurt you for protecting me. There was steel in his voice, an alpha's command that didn't ask, just expected. Weapon. Now. Reluctantly, I pulled my hunting knife from its sheath by the door. Against what waited outside, it felt pathetic. But it was all I had. A heavy knock rattled the wooden frame like a thunderclap. Open in the name of the Alpha King, a voice barked. Dax let out a dark, dangerous laugh. Already claiming my throne. Ambitious bastard. We know you're hiding a fugitive, the voice pressed. Turn him over and no one gets hurt. I glanced at Dax. He was on his feet now, barely. Standing, swaying slightly, dressed in nothing but the bandages around his ribs and leg. And yet, even wounded, He radiated that lethal dominance only a true alpha could carry. "There's a back way," I whispered. "Through the root cellar. Leads to a tunnel I dug during my first year here. It comes out near the river." Surprise flickered across his face. "Always expecting wolves to show up at your door, huh? Can you blame me? Not even a little." His eyes softened just for a breath. "But I'm not running. Not this time." "That's not running," I countered. "It's a tactical retreat. You're in no shape for a fight." Another knock, harder, angrier. "Last warning before we take the door off its hinges." Dax stepped toward me, looming fierce. "Trust me, little healer. I've lived through worse." There was something in his presence, in that wounded but unyielding stance, that sparked a flicker of hope inside me. But I wasn't foolish enough to believe we could fight our way out. We needed something else. "Wait," I said. Suddenly, a plan snapping together in my head. "I know these woods better than anyone. If we can buy time—" I darted to the hearth, snatched down a bundle of herbs I kept hanging for emergencies, and tossed them into the fire. The flames hissed and flared green, filling the cottage with thick, sweet-smelling smoke. "What the hell are you doing?" Dax coughed, covering his nose, creating confusion. I grabbed a cloak and threw it over his shoulders. "The smoke will mask your scent and throw them off." I pressed a tiny vial into his hand. "Drink this. It'll make you smell like me for about an hour." He stared at me like he was seeing something new. "You've picked up a few tricks in exile." "Necessity tends to be a great teacher," I muttered, heart hammering. I stepped toward the door. "Follow my lead. Don't say a word unless absolutely necessary." When I opened it, 5 werewolves stood in my garden, all in human form, all armed to the teeth. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with icy eyes, stepped forward. "Where is he?" he demanded. I blinked, feigning confusion. "Who?" He sniffed the air, frowning as the green smoke curled around us. "Don't play dumb, Omega. We tracked the Alpha King's blood to this door. I found a wolf last night," I said calmly. "He died. I burned the body at dawn, ritual cleansing as is proper." "You're interrupting sacred ground." I gestured toward the smoke as if it was part of an ancient rite, a final blessing to guide his spirit. They exchanged uncertain glances. They'd expected resistance. Not this. "You want us to believe the Alpha King died of his wounds," the leader sneered. "And who's this?" He gestured to Dax, now cloaked and partially hidden in smoke. "My brother," I said without missing a beat. "He arrived this morning to help with the winter harvest." Dax kept his head bowed, body slouched in submission, playing the role of a low-ranking wolf. It had to be, killing his pride, but he didn't falter. The leader stepped closer, suspicion thick in the air. "Remove your hood, brother." My stomach dropped. At this range, even masked by herbs and smoke, they could recognize him. I needed a distraction. Fast. A howl shattered the stillness, sharp, close, desperate. Every head snapped toward the sound. "Eastern border intruders," one of the wolves shouted. The howl shattered the air, a sharp warning cry from Jace. The leader hesitated, torn between questioning me further and responding to the obvious threat. "Search the cottage," he ordered, motioning to 2 of his men. "We'll check the border. If you find anything, howl." He turned his cold eyes on me, his voice low but commanding. "This isn't over, Omega." As the wolves disappeared into the trees, the others stepped inside, their gazes sweeping the room. I braced myself for the discovery, for the fight that would surely follow. But then Dax's hand found mine, giving it a brief but reassuring squeeze. Minutes later, the wolves returned, frustration etched on their faces. Nothing one of them reported, just herbs and women's stuff. "The place reeks of that green smoke." I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. As I said, a cleansing ritual. They left reluctantly, casting suspicious glances over their shoulders. When they were out of sight, Dax straightened, his previous submission vanishing in an instant. "That howl," he said, quietly. "There was no warning in it. That was a hunting call. I nodded. The same realization had struck me. Someone else is in these woods. Either they're hunting or they're being hunted. A predatory gleam entered Dax's amber eyes. The loyalists who escaped the coup will be looking for me. Hope and fear twisted together in my chest. Then we need to find them first. Dax studied me, something like respect in his gaze. You're full of surprises, Lyra of Silver Creek. For a defective Omega, you handle yourself remarkably well under pressure. 10 years alone teaches you to be resourceful. I glanced toward the trees where the wolves had vanished. But they'll be back once they realize they've been deceived. Then we shouldn't be here when they return. Dax winced as he took a step, his injured leg nearly buckling beneath him. Show me this secret tunnel of yours. As I led him toward the root cellar, the pendant around my neck pulsed with warmth. The quiet ones see what others miss, I whispered to myself. Perhaps what others had seen in me as a deficiency was actually a different kind of strength. One that could, against all odds, save the Alpha King and change the fate of the Northern Territories. For the first time in 10 years, something dangerous stirred within me. Purpose. The tunnel beneath my cottage was narrow and damp, forcing Dax to hunch as we made our slow way through the darkness. I led the way with a small oil lamp, careful not to hurry despite the urgency pressing on me. Every strained breath Dax took behind me was a stark reminder of his precarious condition. How much farther? Asked, his voice tight with the effort of staying upright. Not far, I said, glancing back. The lamp's light caught the sheen of sweat on his face. The river cave is just ahead. We emerged into a small cavern where the underground stream that fed my well met the wider river. Pale light filtered through cracks in the ceiling, illuminating the moss-covered walls and the soft ripple of the water. I had spent countless hours here during my first years of exile, finding solace in the quiet sanctuary hidden from the world above. Clever Dax murmured, straightening as much as the low ceiling allowed. No wolf would think to look underground. That was the idea. I set the lamp down on a flat stone. We should rest before moving on. You're bleeding again. He glanced down at the fresh red stain spreading across the bandage on his side. A minor setback. There's nothing minor about blood loss. I gestured to a smooth rock shelf covered with dried moss. Sit before you fall. To my surprise, he complied without protest, lowering himself carefully with a barely suppressed groan. His face had taken on an alarming pallor, and the herbs and poultice I had applied seemed to be losing the battle against his wounds and the lingering effects of the silver poisoning. I knelt beside him, checking his injury carefully. Dax winced as I tightened the bandages across his side. The tunnel keeps running downstream. It'll take us deeper into the forest, far from any search parties. And then what he asked, his amber gaze locking onto mine, burning hot with fever, but still sharp as ever. We just disappear into the trees until winter kills us both. We find your loyalists, I answered, forcing more certainty into my voice than I actually felt. Whoever sent that hunting call, they could be looking for you. He shook his head slowly. Could have been anyone. My uncle's dogs setting a trap. Rogues using the chaos. Hell, even regular wolves chasing deer. His hand caught my wrist as I adjusted the bandage again. We need a real plan. That sudden warmth at his touch sent a jolt through me I didn't ask for. I pulled away quickly, focusing on the medical kit instead. You got a better idea, I challenged, because last I checked, you could barely stand, let alone reclaim a kingdom. The Silver Sanctuary, he murmured after a beat. It's 3 days north in the mountain range. Sacred ground. Protected by old magic. I turned toward him slowly. And what does that get us? If I can make it there, he said, voice low but steady, I can invoke the right of sovereign blood. The what now? It's ancient, he explained. A summoning call, one that no royal wolf can ignore. Not even Roderick. It brings every bloodline with a claim to the throne, and forces them to answer. On that ground with the spirits watching, we finish this the old way. Combat. I said the word heavy in my chest. In your condition, I'll be healed by then, he replied grimly. Or I'll die trying to get there. There has to be another option. There isn't, he said, the edge in his voice cutting deep. This is between wolves, Lyra. Something hollow and old twisted in my chest. That feeling of being pushed out, of being told you don't belong. I'd lived with that since the day Alistair cast me out. Since the first time the pack looked at me like I was broken. You made it my fight when you bled out on my doorstep, I snapped, rising to my feet. And if you think I patched you up just so you could march off to die some heroic death, you're out of your damn mind. For a second he just stared. Then something that looked suspiciously like amusement flickered across his face. Not many people talk to me like that. Not many people have seen you half dead and delirious either. I scooped water from the stream into a small clay cup I'd stashed in the cave. Drink. Then we figure out the next move. As he drank, I moved silently to the cave entrance, listening. The woods above had gone eerily quiet. No birds, no wind. Just silence too perfect to be natural. Someone's coming, I whispered quickly, dousing the lamp. Dax was instantly alert, pushing himself upright, despite the pain, his body tensing like a coiled spring. How many, I don't know, I admitted, straining with all my senses, frustrated that my bond to the pack's magic was faint at best. I wasn't fully human. But I wasn't truly wolf either. Just stuck in between. Then a shape appeared at the cave entrance. Not a wolf. A woman. Silhouetted against the fading light, a bow drawn taut, an arrow aimed straight at us. One wrong move, she said coolly, and I'll put this straight through your throat. Dax shifted slightly, placing himself between me and the threat without even thinking. The move, instinctive, protective, stirred something deep and quiet in my chest. We don't mean any harm, I said, raising my hand slowly. We're just Lyra, she interrupted, her grip faltering slightly on the bowstring. The sound of my name from a stranger's lips hit like ice water. How do you know me? The woman stepped forward, allowing light to catch her face. She was older than I first thought, streaks of gray laced through her dark hair, deep lines around eyes that had clearly seen hard years. There was something in the tilt of her jaw, the way her eyes locked onto mine, that felt oddly familiar. Then she spoke. My daughter mentioned you often, she said quietly, lowering the bow at last, before she died. The memory struck like lightning of a girl with gentle eyes, the only one who had dared speak to me the day I was cast out. She had slipped a blanket and bread into my hands when no one was looking. Kira, I whispered. You're Kira's mother. The woman nodded, and for a heartbeat, grief softened the battle lines on her face. I'm Rhea, once of Silver Creek, now of no pack. Her gaze shifted to Dax and widened in recognition. You're wounded, my king. Dax pulled himself straighter, managing to project raw dominance, even with nothing but bloodied bandages and a borrowed cloak hanging off his shoulders. You still stand loyal, then, he said. Until my last breath. Rhea replied without pause. Others do too. We've been searching for you since the coup, but we must hurry. Roderick's hunters are crawling these woods, and they carry silver. How many wolves still stand with me? Dax asked. Maybe 50. 60 if we're lucky, she answered grimly. We're scattered. Some were killed during the first attack. Her mouth tightened. You're Beta. Zane. He betrayed you. I know, Dax replied, his voice like frost. He'll answer for it when I reclaim the throne. I looked between them, pieces falling into place. You're heading to the Silver Sanctuary. Rhea's eyes narrowed. How do you know about that? I told her, Dax said before I could answer. Lyra saved my life. She's earned my trust. Just a simple sentence, but it filled my chest with something warm and unfamiliar. Then we share the same path, Rhea said, already turning toward the cave entrance. Can you travel, my king? My companions wait a mile upstream with horses. Dax nodded, though I could see how much it cost him to even pretend he was okay. Lead on. As she moved, I touched his arm. You're in no condition for this. I don't have a choice, he said, eyes locked on mine. Fierce, unyielding. But I want you with us, if you're willing. Your healing may be the difference between life and death in the coming days. It wasn't a request. Alphas didn't ask. But it was closer than I expected. And something inside me stirred. Something old. Something that had been asleep for years. I'll need supplies from my cottage, I said. Herbs, bandages, and remedies from Maeve's old chest. Too risky. Rhea cut in. The Iron Fangs will be watching that place. Then we'll find what we need in the woods, I said already, cataloging what plants were still growing in the autumn wild. Difficult, but doable. We followed Rhea through the forest, moving slowly to accommodate Dax's injuries. His pain was obvious, but he never asked for help. Jaw clenched back, straight eyes burning. The silence around him dared anyone to mention his weakness. I stayed close, watching him for signs of collapse, ready to force rest if I had to. The trip took twice as long as it should have. By the time we reached the small clearing, the sun was overhead. 3 wolves stood, waiting, 2 men and 1 woman. When they saw Dax, they dropped to one knee, as if gravity itself demanded it. My lord, the older man said, his voice thick with relief. We feared the worst. It'll take more than my uncle's treachery to end my reign, Dax said, his voice like steel wrapped in fire. Get up. We've got no time for ceremony. As the others readied the horses, Rhea pulled me aside. You're not what I pictured, she said quietly. What exactly did you expect, I asked. Kira said you were soft, gentle, quiet, scared. You seem different, Mira said, her voice softer now, a flicker of concern in her eyes. I thought of the terrified child I had been cast out, abandoned for simply being different. 10 years of solitude had a way of changing you, leaving scars that no one saw. I can relate, she said quietly, understanding the silent weight of my history. But what happened to Kira? Her question made my heart tighten. You should know, I whispered back, dreading the answer I had to give. She died protecting a young Omega. I said each word like a shard in my chest. She showed signs of the same condition I have. Victor wanted to exile her, just like he did you. Mira's voice cracked with emotion, and for the first time I saw the depth of the woman's grief. Kira stood against him. She continued, her tone thick with rage. She was his daughter, but he struck her down in front of the entire pack. For her defiance, horror clawed at my throat. I had no words for the grief that threatened to drown me. When 2 seasons passed after her death, I couldn't stay, Mira whispered. Others felt the same way. We joined the king's court, hoping to change the laws to stop alphas like Victor from holding such power. Her eyes turned to Dax, and then she added, Now everything hangs by a thread. I followed her gaze to Dax, still standing with his loyal wolves, giving quiet orders, despite the toll his body had taken. Even in this broken state, he radiated power. There was something magnetic about him, something that went beyond his physical strength or his title. It was his core of integrity shining through, despite the chaos. He's a good king, then? I asked quietly. The best in generations, Mira replied, unwavering. He's worked hard to reform the old ways, to give wolves, especially Omegas, more protection. She gave me a pointed look. That's why Roderick moved against him. The old guard fears change. The weight of her words settled heavily in my chest. This wasn't just about one wolf fighting for his title. This was about the future of all wolves like me. The possibility of a world where being different didn't mean death. Dax moved toward us, his body stiff but still standing tall, despite the obvious pain. We need to move. Roderick will have sentries posted on all the major roads to the north. There's another way. I found myself saying an idea coming to me suddenly. Through the deep mist valleys. No wolf patrols there. Mira's eyes flashed with warning. For good reason. Those valleys are cursed. Wolves who enter don't come back. I've foraged there for years, I said, my voice steady. The dangers are real, but manageable if you know the paths. Dax's amber eyes searched mine, weighing my words. You'd guide us. The pendant at my neck seemed to hum against my skin. Maeve's words echoed in my mind. Your strength lies where others perceive weakness. Maybe that's what she had meant. My years of exile had given me knowledge that others didn't have. A skill that could help save Dax and change the fate of the Northern Territories. I said, meeting Dax's gaze without hesitation. A smile tugged at the corner of Dax's lips, the first real smile I had seen from him. It softened his face, giving me a glimpse of the man he could be when peace was his reality, not war. Then it seems, he said, his voice warm with something like respect, that fate brought you to my door for more reasons than one. As we mounted the horses, Dax insisted I ride with him, likely to monitor his condition, though I suspected it was also to ensure I didn't change my mind. The shift in the world around me was palpable. For 10 years I had lived on the edges of werewolf society, accepting my exile as the punishment for being born wrong. But now, with the weight of an Alpha King's trust on my shoulders and the future of my kind hanging in the balance, I wondered if all those years had been preparing me for this chance to redefine what an Omega could be. The deep mist valleys lived up to their name. By late afternoon, we were engulfed in thick fog, swirling like ghosts around us, turning the towering pines into shadowy sentinels. The air was heavier here, charged with an ancient, almost magical energy that made the horses skittish and put the wolves on edge. Stay close, I murmured to the small group behind me. The path narrows soon, and there are sinkholes on either side. I felt Dax's arms tighten around my waist as he adjusted himself behind me on the horse. Despite his insistence that he was fine, I could feel the toll the journey had already taken on him. Every movement was a struggle, but his pride kept him from asking for help. The fever from his wounds was rising, and his breathing had grown shallow against my back. Yet Dax still maintained the regal bearing expected of an Alpha King, never once complaining, never showing an ounce of weakness in front of his loyal wolves. How much farther until we can rest? He asked, his voice low enough that only I could hear. There's a clearing about an hour ahead, I replied, matching his quiet tone. It's protected by a ring of Rowan trees. The mist doesn't penetrate there. Rowan trees, he repeated with a hint of amusement in his voice. Fitting. I guided the horse carefully around a fallen log, my mind racing, but my actions steady. The clearing has herbs that will help with your fever. His silence told me everything. The great Alpha King was reaching his limits, though he would die before admitting it to anyone but me. In the span of a single day, I had somehow become his confidant, the only person allowed to see his vulnerability. Behind us, Rhea and the 3 loyal wolves followed in single file. They had accepted my leadership through the valleys with minimal protest, though I caught their occasional glances, uncertainty in their eyes about trusting their king's life to an exiled Omega with a reputation as murky as mine. Tell me about this curse, Dax said, breaking the silence as we navigated a particularly narrow stretch of the path. What keeps other wolves away from these valleys? I thought carefully before speaking. It's not just one curse, but many. The deep mist valleys sit on old ley lines, channels of raw, untamed magic. Strange things happen here, like what he asked, his voice curious but wary. Time moves differently in some places. In others, nightmares become real. I pointed to a cluster of shimmering crystals growing from a nearby tree trunk. Those are dream shards. They capture the dreams of anything that sleeps near them. Dax studied the glittering crystals, his gaze thoughtful. And you've survived here alone? The valleys don't harm those who respect them, I replied, my fingers brushing the pendant at my throat. My grandmother taught me the old magics before I was exiled. She said the magic responds to intention more than strength or status. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. Dax's voice softened with admiration. She was, I said, the familiar ache of loss, tightening my chest. She died the winter before my exile. I sometimes wonder if she knew what was coming. I continued quietly. Maybe that's why she gave me this pendant. She wanted me to be ready to learn what I could in case. My words trailed off, the weight of the past pulling at my heart. The quiet ones see what others miss, Dax murmured, surprising me by quoting the very words my grandmother had spoken. Heat rushed to my cheeks as I twisted to look back at him. You heard that? He nodded, his eyes intense. You whispered it last night while I was healing. His gaze softened just a fraction. Your grandmother. She knew. Before I could respond, a sharp whistle cut through the fog, a signal from Rhea. I reined in the horse, raising a hand to signal for silence. Through the mist, I saw dark shapes moving large and low to the ground. They weren't wolves. Something else. Something that moved with deliberate, patient hunger. Mist panthers. I whispered, my voice taut with warning. Don't run. They chase anything that flees. The wolves had already dismounted, positioning themselves in a protective circle around Dax's horse. Their bodies were tense, ready to shift at a moment's notice to protect their king. But Dax's hand on my arm stopped me from giving the order to defend. No, he said, his voice calm but firm. In your valley, we follow your lead. I nodded, slipping from the horse and moving toward the nearest shadowy form with slow, deliberate steps. The mist panther emerged from the fog, its massive form almost ghost-like. Its fur seemed to be woven from the mist itself, and its eyes gleamed with an eerie phosphorescence. We seek safe passage, I said firmly, meeting the creature's glowing eyes without hesitation. We honor the old ways. We mean no harm to the valleys or their guardians. The panther's gaze shifted from me to Dax, still mounted on the horse. It let out a low rumbling sound, less a growl, more like thunder rolling from far-off cliffs. Blood-wounded, it said, its voice, like dry leaves rustling through fog. Death-marked. A shiver rippled through the group. We'd all heard legends of the phantom claws, but few believed they could speak. Fewer still had ever heard one do so. Behind me, I felt Dax sit straighter, summoning his presence despite the weight of pain dragging at his limbs. I am Dax Alpha King of the Northern Territories, he said, steady and unwavering, and I will not die this day. The creature's mist-woven form seemed to shimmer with what almost looked like amusement. Brave words, Wolf King, but we smell the silver in your blood. My hand instinctively moved to the pouch of herbs at my hip. I can heal him, I said louder than I meant to, drawing from a courage I didn't feel. If you allow us a passage to the Rowan clearing, the exiled one returns. The phantom claw murmured, fixing its gaze on me. But now she is not alone. Why should we allow it? I hesitated, heartbeat pounding. These weren't ordinary predators. They didn't care about thrones or titles. Their allegiance was to balance, to ancient forces deeper than politics. Because balance must be restored, I answered. The usurper who wounded him, Roderick, seeks to return the packs to tyranny. Alphas with no limits, omegas and betas, cast aside as lesser beings. Dax fights for something else, for a future where wolves like me are no longer disposable. The phantom claw was silent for a long time. Its body rippled like fog in a breeze, then turned toward the shadows. Low growls followed quiet and rhythmic language I couldn't understand. Finally, it turned back to me. The Rowan clearing lies there, it said, nodding toward a barely visible trail veiled by vines and shadow. You may pass until moonrise tomorrow. After that, you are prey, like all others who dare the mists. Thank you, I said softly, bowing my head. As we turned onto the hidden path, Dax leaned forward to whisper against my ear. That was some negotiation, little healer. Is there anything you can't do? Plenty. I said, but couldn't stop the smile that pulled at my lips. For one, I can't fully shift. He pulled me closer for just a second, his voice warm in my ear. And yet you stood your ground against a phantom claw without flinching. Maybe full shifting's overrated. The unexpected praise set something loose in my chest, something warm and dangerous. I focused on guiding our horse forward instead of wondering why his approval mattered so much. The Rowan clearing appeared just as we rounded a bend, an open circle of even ground, surrounded by slender trees, bearing crimson berries. Just like the stories, the mist ended cleanly at the tree line as though held back by unseen magic. Late afternoon light poured through the canopy above, golden and warm, a rare comfort after the fog-drenched silence we'd passed through. "We'll camp here," I announced, sliding off the horse. "Help me get him down." Rhea and the others rushed to assist as Dax's body finally gave out, his strength drained. They made a quick bed of cloaks while I dropped to my knees at his side, scanning the clearing's edge for medicinal herbs. "His fever's worse," Rhea said quietly. "The silver's spreading." I nodded grimly. The skin around Dax's wound had turned a dull gray, black veins, creeping outward like frost through dead wood. A textbook case of silver poisoning. If we don't intervene now, he won't last the night. I need hot water, clean cloth. I rifled through the herbs I'd just gathered. And privacy. Rhea raised a brow at that last part but nodded. "You heard her?" she said to the others. No questions asked. Rhea didn't waste time. "Make yourselves useful," she snapped at the others. "Secure the perimeter. Check the horses." As they scattered into motion, I turned back to Dax. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow, but the tightness in his jaw told me he was still conscious. "This is going to hurt," I warned. Unwrapping, the bandages stained dark with blood and silver. The treatment for silver poisoning isn't gentle. His eyes opened, fevered, glassy, but still burning with awareness. "Do what you must," he rasped. I worked quickly, methodically, cleaned the wound, then applied a thick paste made from rare herbs I'd gathered in the clearing, moonflower wolf's bane, and a speckled fungus that only grows on the bark of Rowan trees. The moment the mixture touched his skin, Dax's body arched, a strangled cry escaping his throat before he managed to choke it down. I pressed a hand to his chest directly over his heart. "Breathe," I whispered. "Focus on my voice." And then something strange happened. A warm pulse spread from my palm into his chest like a current of calm cutting through the pain. His breathing evened. The rigid lines in his muscles softened. His amber eyes locked onto mine, wide with disbelief. "You're doing it," he whispered. "The Omega gift." I froze. "That's not possible," I said, yanking my hand back. "I'm defective." He reached for my wrist, guiding my hand back to his chest. "Then do it again," he said more gently now. "Please." Trembling, I focused on that sensation, that warm flow of energy. And again it surged. Stronger this time, like something inside me had finally awakened. "I don't understand," I murmured. "I've never been able to do this before." Dax's fingers curled around mine, anchoring my hand to him. "Maybe you needed the right wolf," he said, voice rough but steadier than before. "Or maybe you were never broken, just misunderstood." The thought hit like lightning, that all these years I'd carried something sacred only buried beneath fear, shame, exile. That I wasn't flawed, just different. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just held that connection, letting the healing flow until the treatment was done. By the time I finished, night had fallen. The others had built a fire in the center of the clearing, keeping their distance, though I could feel their eyes on me, watching, questioning. Dax had slipped into sleep, finally, his breathing slow and deep. The gray hue in his skin had started to fade. The worst had passed. Rhea approached quietly, handing me a tin cup of steaming broth. "You need to eat," she said simply. "You used a lot of energy." "Thanks," I said, accepting the cup with shaking hands, only now realizing how drained I felt. She settled beside me, her eyes drifting to Dax, then back to me. "I saw what you did," she said softly. "That touch, the calm that came over him. I don't know how it happened," I admitted. "It's never happened before. Maybe you never had a reason to try," she offered. "Or maybe your gift was always meant for him." I stiffened. "What are you saying?" Her expression was unreadable. "There are old stories of gifts that only awaken in the presence of a true mate." Heat rose in my cheeks. "That's ridiculous. He's the Alpha King. I'm an exiled Omega with an unstable ability. And yet you risked everything for him," she said, her tone calm. "And he trusts you more than anyone else around him. The old magic doesn't care about rank or bloodlines. It answers to truth." Before I could respond, a low growl cut through the clearing. Jace, the youngest of the loyal wolves, stood at the edge of the tree line, his body tense, eyes locked on the mist. "Something's coming," he warned. More than one figure moved in the mist. I rose quickly and stepped beside Jace, eyes narrowing as I scanned the fog. Through faint breaks in the haze, I caught glimpses, shadows shifting with purpose. Too calculated to be phantom claws, too quiet to be wild animals. "Iron Fangs," Rhea whispered, slipping beside us. "But how did they find us?" My mind raced, stitching the clues together. The mist valleys were impossible to navigate without deep knowledge. No ordinary soldier could have tracked us through them. Unless they didn't follow us directly. "They didn't," I murmured. "They tracked us to the edge and waited. They knew we'd have to emerge eventually." "They're covering the exits," Cole said grimly. "But this clearing isn't near any of them." "No," I agreed. "But the Rowan clearing isn't a secret to those who study the old paths. If Roderick has access to the royal archives, he'd know this place exists." Rhea's jaw clenched. "Then we're trapped." "Not yet," I said, fingers brushing the pendant at my throat as a new idea sparked. "This clearing is guarded by ancient magic. They can see it, but they can't enter without permission." "And what if they just wait us out?" asked Tara quietly. "The phantom claws only gave us protection until moonrise." I looked up. The moon was a slim silver crescent barely visible through the thinning mist. We had maybe 18 hours, maybe less. "Then we need to buy time," I said. "A distraction. Something that'll force them to move. Just long enough for us to get Dax to the sanctuary." "I could draw them off," Rhea offered, already thinking ahead. "Take 2 others, split their focus." "That's suicide," I shot back. "They're armed with silver. They won't hesitate. We're sworn to him," she said evenly. "If our lives buy his, that's a trade I'll make." The calm in her voice gutted me. These weren't just soldiers, they were believers. They'd chosen Dax not for his power, but for what he represented, a new future. Then a low voice cut through the air behind us. "No one dies for me today." We all turned. Dax stood tall, pale, but steady, his posture regal and unshaken. The fever had broken. My herbs and whatever Omega magic had sparked between us had worked better than I dared to hope. He walked forward slowly, his eyes fixed on the veil of mist beyond the trees. "There's another way," he said. "No blood, no tricks, my king," Rhea prompted. Dax's gaze found mine unwavering. "We don't need the sanctuary. We complete the rite of sovereign blood here now." Gasps rippled through the camp. "But that ground is sacred," Jace began. Dax cut him off. "Sacred ground is what I declare it to be. The old texts are clear. In times of dire need, the Alpha King can consecrate new ground. This place is strong with magic older than even the sanctuary. This is where we take our stand." "But the rite needs preparation," Rhea argued. "Sacred herbs, the royal chalice." "We have something better," Dax said. He reached forward, fingers brushing the pendant at my throat. "A talisman of the old ways, carried by someone who understands its power." I froze as his fingers rested lightly on the pendant. My hand moved reflexively over his, protectively guarding what little I had left of Maeve. "This was my grandmother's," I whispered. "It's not a royal relic." He smiled softly with something like awe flickering in his eyes. "Look closer, Lyra. Look at the wolf's eyes." I glanced down, lifting the pendant to the firelight. The tiny blue stones set in the silver wolf's face shimmered faintly light, blooming from within like a sleeping star. "Moonstone," Dax said. His voice dropped to something reverent, older than the royal chalice, more sacred than any symbol worn by a crown. The royal stone used in every coronation since the first Alpha King. Dax's voice dropped reverent. "This pendant isn't just symbolic, Lyra. It's a legacy." "That's impossible," I whispered. "Maeve was just a healer. She never claimed anything more than that." His gaze didn't waver. "Maybe she was more than you ever knew." His hand closed gently over mine, still resting on the pendant. "But that's a mystery for another time. Right now we have to prepare for the rite." He turned then, addressing the loyal wolves with the full weight of his restored authority. "At dawn, I call my Uncle Roderick to judgment." As the others moved to begin preparations, Dax kept his hand over mine for one last lingering moment. His voice dropped low, meant only for me. "You've saved me twice now, little healer," he murmured. "Once with your herbs, and again with a gift you never knew you had. I still don't know how I did it." I admitted, my voice barely a breath. His eyes shimmered with firelight, warm and sharp and impossibly soft at the same time. "Maybe some things aren't meant to be explained," he said. "Maybe they're just meant to be felt." His fingers curled briefly around mine, firm grounding, and then he stepped away to confer with Rhea. I stood still, staring down at the pendant that now pulsed faintly against my skin. No longer just a keepsake, but a key to something greater. Whatever my grandmother had hidden, whatever Maeve knew when she passed it to me, it was all leading here, to now. A life I'd once thought wasted in exile had somehow been preparing me for this. To stand beside an Alpha King, to challenge the past, to rewrite what it means to be Omega. Dawn broke in eerie silence. The mist had thickened overnight, wrapping the Rowan clearing in a dense white shroud. We couldn't see them, but we felt them iron fangs waiting beyond the tree-line. Breath held blades ready. At the center of the clearing stood Dax, no longer the broken fugitive I'd found bleeding at my doorstep, but a king reborn. The herbs had done their work. The silver was gone from his blood, and what remained was raw strength and resolve. Even the makeshift cloak Rhea had fashioned from scraps now looked like something out of legend, regal and warrior worn. "It's time," Dax said, his voice deep, commanding, echoing through the mist. "Lyra, the pendant." My heart clenched. I stepped forward, pulse hammering. Last night, as we prepared the rite, Dax had revealed pieces of a history I never knew I was part of, how the pendant had vanished from the royal line generations ago, how its disappearance marked a schism in the bloodline, and how its reappearance now couldn't be coincidence. "She never told me," I whispered as I removed the chain from my neck. "Maeve never said a word." "Why would she keep that secret?" "To protect you," Dax replied softly, brushing my fingers as he took it. "Or maybe to prepare you for something she saw coming." As the morning light spilled through the branches, the silver pendant glowed, moonstone eyes igniting from within. Dax held it high. The wolves formed a circle around us, their faces solemn, their postures reverent. By ancient right and sovereign blood, Dax proclaimed, his voice suddenly deeper, resonant, ancient. "I consecrate this ground." The words trembled through my bones. "I call upon the ancestors to bear witness. I summon those of my line to judgment." He took a small ceremonial blade and sliced his palm. 3 drops of blood splashed onto the pendant. The moment blood met silver, a shockwave exploded outward. It didn't roar, it rang like a bell struck through the world. Magic rolled off the ground in pulses, rustling the trees, shattering the stillness. The mist surrounding the clearing lit up with sudden light blue gold white. From the woods came startled howls, shouts of pain, confusion. The Iron Fangs had felt it too. "It's working," Rhea breathed beside me. Her voice was trembling. "The call has gone out." His eyes locked onto mine, burning with a purpose so clear it cut through the thickening air. Now we wait. The waiting was brutal. Minutes dragged into hours, each one heavier than the last. The loyal wolves rotated patrols, watching the perimeter with sharpened instincts. Movement stirred in the mist beyond the Rowan trees, shadows pacing, circling, but no coordinated strike came. Whatever power Dax had unleashed with the right, it had thrown the Iron Fangs off balance. I sat beside him, sharing a simple meal of dried meat and foraged berries. "What happens when they show up?" I asked quietly. "The right of sovereign blood compels them to attend." Dax answered, voice flat. "But it doesn't promise peace." He looked out into the white void. "There will be a challenge. Blood will spill." I exhaled hard. "There's really no other way." He studied me, those amber eyes deep as old earth. "You really are an Omega," he said, the faintest smile tugging his lips. "Always looking for a way out that doesn't end in violence. Is that so wrong?" "No." He reached over, letting his hand rest gently on mine. "That's why Omegas matter. Because you remind Alphas that power doesn't always come from bloodshed." His smile deepened just a touch. "It's also why I need you." That quiet confession landed like a heartbeat against my chest. Before I could respond, a commotion at the edge of the clearing shattered the silence. 3 figures stepped through the mist, 2 guards flanking a man who walked like he owned the world. Tall, commanding, cold, and hauntingly familiar. Roderick. He bore Dax's features, same sharp jaw, same regal stance, but none of the fire. Just ice. Uncle Dax greeted him, rising tall, his voice steady. "You heard the summons." "The old magic is persistent," Roderick said, his tone dripping disdain. "Though I admit I'm surprised to find you still breathing. You and many others, it seems." Roderick scoffed. Zane saw reason. He understood your delusions would fracture the packs. He stepped further into the clearing, his guards trailing him like shadows. "Alphas rule with strength. Omegas obey. That's how it's always been. And that tradition," Dax said, his tone razor sharp, "has led to suffering, exile, and rot from the inside. The world is changing." His gaze flicked to me just for a moment, and Roderick caught it. "What is this?" he sneered. "A human pet you picked up in exile." "This is Lyra Dax," said his voice, calm but steel underneath. "Omega of Silver Creek, exiled for being different, and bearer of the lost royal pendant." The color drained from Roderick's face as his eyes found the silver wolf at my neck. "That's not possible. That pendant vanished with the eastern line." "Then perhaps it wasn't destroyed," Dax replied, taking a step closer. "Perhaps you've missed more than you think, Uncle, like the depth of your own betrayal." Roderick's expression hardened like stone. "Trinkets and half-blooded rejects won't save you. I challenge you, here and now, by right of blood and dominance." Dax didn't flinch. "I accept," he said, his voice echoing through the clearing. "Let the ancestors decide." The loyal wolves expanded their circle shoulders, squared faces set. An arena formed from silence and power. Rhea grabbed my arm, pulling me back. I resisted. "He's still recovering," I whispered. "This is madness." "This is who we are," she said softly. "You brought him back, Lyra. Now trust what you've awakened." Without warning, both men shifted. Bones snapped, muscle reshaped, skin gave way to fur and fang. Dax's transformation was fluid radiant, even his wolf form, tall, powerful, and fierce. Midnight black fur rippled over corded muscle, his golden eyes flashing like twin suns. Roderick's wolf was gray with age, but still terrifying in its raw presence. Strength honed by cruelty. The two alphas stood facing one another night against storm, each carrying the weight of a kingdom on their shoulders. And the ground beneath us held its breath. Dax's midnight black fur shimmered in the early sunlight, his amber eyes burning like twin embers in the darkness of his wolf form. They circled each other slowly, two apex predators reading every twitch, every breath, waiting for the moment to strike. Roderick moved first fast and vicious, lunging for Dax's still healing side. But Dax was quicker than expected, twisting out of reach and clamping his powerful jaws onto Roderick's shoulder. The impact cracked through the clearing like a gunshot. The fight descended into raw, brutal chaos, claws slashing teeth, snapping muscle, straining. It was instinct versus strategy, brute force versus purpose. I could barely watch. Every time one of them cried out, pain pierced through me like it was my own. This was the world I had been cast out of, a world that demanded dominance and shed blood for leadership. Roderick had age and cunning, and he used both mercilessly. Twice he nearly pinned Dax. But Dax, wounded, exhausted, still bearing the weight of silver that had almost killed him, fought with something deeper. A cause, a purpose, something righteous. When Dax sank his teeth deep into Roderick's foreleg, the older wolf faltered, staggering sideways, just long enough for Dax to knock him flat onto his back. In a blur, Dax's massive jaws locked around his uncle's exposed throat. The kill position. The forest stilled. Even the mist held its breath. And then Dax let go. He stepped back, shifting out of wolf form, blood-slicked and bruised, but unbroken. He stood tall, defiant. "I won't kill you, uncle," he said, voice rough from the strain. "Not because you deserve mercy, but because I won't rebuild this kingdom on blood." Roderick transformed back, snarling, chest heaving. "Weakness," he spat. "This is why you're not fit to rule." No, Dax said, calm but resolute. "This is why I have to rule. The cycle of violence ends here." He turned to the loyal wolves. "Restrain him. He'll face trial for his crimes, along with every Ironfang who betrayed their oaths." As they moved to take Roderick, something pulsed at my throat. I looked down. The moonstone eyes of the silver wolf pendant were glowing bright, brilliant, blinding. "Dax!" I called, my voice trembling. "Something's happening!" He turned just as a burst of radiant blue-white light exploded from the pendant, flooding the clearing. When the light faded, a figure shimmered into view, transparent, glowing unmistakably familiar. An older woman. Kind eyes. A gentle smile. My breath caught. "Maeve," I whispered. She nodded. "My sweet Lyra, you've become everything I knew you could be." Tears welled up. "I don't understand." "How the pendant," she said, voice echoing like wind in the trees. "It's more than a relic. It holds the wisdom of our line, kept safe through me until one arose who could bring unity." Her gaze moved to Dax and me, the alpha who leads with compassion, the omega who brings strength. Only together can the future be forged. Dax stepped beside me, his expression unreadable, but reverent. "You're from the Eastern bloodline, the one my grandfather believed he wiped out." Maeve nodded. "I survived. I hid. I waited. And when Lyra was born with her rare gift, I knew the time would come. I trembled. But I was rejected. Banished. Branded broken." "No, child," Maeve said, voice warm and steady. "You were set on a path one only you could walk. A path that led here. To him. To this moment." The old ache surfaced, memories of being cast aside, labeled defective. But Maeve's voice was steady, sure. "No, child. You were never broken. You were chosen." Her spectral form shimmered, beginning to dissolve into flecks of light. "Your exile shaped you, forged you into something no pack-trained omega could ever become. And it brought you here. To him." She turned to Dax, her expression soft with pride. "The pendant recognized you both. The bond it sealed cannot be undone." As Maeve's presence faded into the morning mist, Her parting words echoed around us like a vow carved in ancient stone. Lead them forward, Alpha and Omega. Strength and compassion, two sides of the same coin. The clearing stood frozen in that light. Then I felt Dax's fingers wrap around mine, firm, steady grounding. She called us her children, he said softly. Not by blood, I whispered, tears stinging. By destiny. Rhea stepped forward slowly, then knelt before me, something I'd never seen in my entire life. The Eastern and Western bloodlines joined at last, she said with reverence. The prophecy is fulfilled. One by one, the others followed. Even the Iron Fangs who once served Roderick bowed low. Only the defeated Alpha stood tall, clinging to defiance. The Pax will never accept an Omega as queen, he sneered, his voice brittle. Dax's hand squeezed mine. They'll accept what they've seen. The old magics have spoken. Then he turned to me, and what I saw in his amber gaze wasn't just respect. It was trust, devotion, and something deeper. If you'll stand with me, Lyra. He didn't need to finish the sentence. I will, I said, as the sun pierced through the mist, golden light breaking across the clearing like dawn after a storm. The weight of 10 years fell from my shoulders. I had believed I was nothing broken, cast aside irrelevant. But here I stood, essential, chosen, strong. The pendant at my throat glowed warm, no longer a symbol of exile, but of legacy. Whatever trials awaited us beyond this moment, I would meet them head on with the strength I'd earned in silence, and the compassion that was always my birthright. Dax brushed a hand along my cheek. The quiet ones see what others miss, he murmured. And you, Lyra, you've seen me more clearly than anyone ever has. When his lips touched mine, it wasn't just a kiss. It was a promise. And in that moment, Alpha and Omega united. I finally understood my greatest weakness had always been my greatest strength. And through that strength, two fractured bloodlines became one.